Global warming is certain to get progressively worse and cannot be stopped over the next 30 years. This is according to a new major UN report on climate.
The IPCC report released by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is made up of a body of scientists, concluded that our hotter future is due to the fact that nations have delayed curbing fossil fuel emissions for so long. The panel also found that humans have already heated the planet by roughly 1.1 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the 19th century by burning coal, oil, and gas for energy.
The report warns that even if countries started drastically cutting emissions today, the Earth's temperature is still likely to rise around 1.5 degrees Celsius within the next 2 decades. But the panel said there's still time to prevent the worst version of our hotter future if nations act now.
So the other thing that this report concluded is that they said we can definitively now link extreme weather events to human activity and to climate change. The last IPCC report in 2013, 2014 had hedged on that and say that there could be some contribution of greenhouse gases toward these extreme events. Now they're saying no, there's absolutely a link. Kim, do you think this will influence the debate? And it's interesting that this is coming right as Democrats are about to start drafting their $3.5 trillion climate-heavy bill.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, this report obviously is meant to get us to say, hey, we've got to do something about this. But on the other hand, my thoughts on this are how are we going to get other countries to actually do what it is that's necessary? I mean, especially developing nations that are saying, hey, listen, America and Europe and all these countries that were able to develop while burning all these fossil fuels, it's our turn and you guys are just trying to keep us down. And, they're not really inclined to listen. They're not really inclined to say, OK, I guess we'll just halt progress for ourselves and we just won't develop because of global warming. I mean, I don't know how exactly we're going to go about trying to enforce this or force countries into compliance. It can't just be the United States. We alone are not going to stop climate change.
Well, and I think that's a great point. I'm a conservative who's been outspoken that this is an existential crisis that my party's got to be more vocal on and we've got to engage on. But I'm also opposed to the Paris Climate Accords because the reality is we had a deal that China, the worst offender on the planet and the most populous country on the planet, was a part of that deal, but did virtually nothing to lower their emissions. So I think the grand question is this: how do we get other countries to get on board? We can certainly, control what we do here domestically, but you have to weigh the factors of we're going to hurt our own productivity, our own GDP growth, our own ability to compete globally while other countries are not doing what they need to address this problem.
Right, but the U.S. is not at all convinced that it itself needs to do anything to reduce its own emissions. So that has to come before we can start lamenting that, these other countries might not want to. I think the answer to why these developing countries are now genuinely very interested in reducing emissions and are not still stuck in the mode of no, we need fossil fuel driven growth because it's our turn, is because of those extreme weather events that this report talks about. Those developing countries are facing droughts, floods, hurricanes, and all sorts of other global. One term that has been developed is global weirding, where you just get these very weird climate patterns and weather patterns that are making it very difficult for farmers to predict, in the ways that they have for centuries. When you have farmers in Northwest United States, who are having their growing season just absolutely destroyed by the heat bubble that is rising, that rose over there at a crucial moment, because they're seeing things like that all across the world. I do think, Kim, that you're starting to see real willpower from from developing countries saying, okay, this is headed for absolute Armageddon. We have to do something different. And if there is an alternative energy source that can allow for development, then let's just go forward with that. Oil is not the only way that we can power our growth.
I'm not really seeing that. I mean, when I look at countries like Brazil, for example, I don't think that there's any political will from any of the people to actually address climate.
Not right now.
Well, and even
Brazil's
really
current government, right?
Right, but even much of the rest of the world, I mean, they've got bigger fish to fry than climate change. I mean, we're talking about populations of people that are looking at drought.
The fish are
and I
actually
understand
literally
that,
frying, though.
right, and I understand. I mean, I understand that we might connect it and say, hey, it's climate that's causing the droughts. It's climate that's causing the fires. It's climate that's causing all these things. But these people are worried about how are they going to feed their children? How are they going to survive? How are they going to deal with war and violence in their country? So I don't know if very many other countries are all that paying too much attention to it. I do think China has actually made some great strides in reducing their emissions, but obviously they're still putting out quite a bit. And I agree that we can't just say, well, I guess if everybody else isn't going to do it, neither should we. I mean, we should certainly be doing something, but
I think as the biggest emitter per capita on the planet, we're just comforting ourselves by telling ourselves that, oh, we would love to do something about this, but really nobody else wants to do anything about it when we're the ones that are gobbling up all the resources and spewing out all the carbon emissions.
Well, a couple of things, just real quick. I mean, listen, if you believe that China is actually incrementally improving, that would require you to trust the CCP data that they put out that is hardly verified and is known for being misleading information. And I would argue a country as populous as China, it certainly is, in fact, contributing to this more than the U.S. is. But in terms of solutions here, because I don't want to get too depressing, I actually believe kind of a counterpoint that the market and consumer demand is going to be the biggest driver of addressing this problem. So I think more and more Americans, especially young Americans, are realizing that this is an issue that we have to deal with and we can't put off longer. So offering alternatives, whether it's, fuel efficient vehicles, whatever it may be, I could see that being something that's much more market and consumer driven than it is the federal government. And then the fact is because I do think there's the economic side of things that are much harder to pass at any kind of a government level. But I think the consumer demand is trending that direction, especially with younger Americans.
I mean, I agree with that. I agree that market solutions are going to be a huge factor in this, but I think that government incentivizing those market solutions is going to be really key in moving them forward and getting people to want to get in on that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. I think the only way that this happens in enough time to mitigate the catastrophes that the IPCC report are predicting is if the government kind of directs this toward renewable energy, toward climate friendly technologies. At that point, consumers are going to be happy to pick that. But as long as we're doing all of this on the back of a fossil fuel economy, then there isn't enough power behind consumer behavior to move it fast enough.
Well, two quick things. I do think that we need to move to an all-of-the-above approach on energy and energy efficiency. And yes, of course, look at phasing out those fossil fuels, but doing it in a way that doesn't crush and eradicate entire industries and leave tens of thousands of Americans unemployed. But one thing I want to say is I think this is as much a cultural battle as it is a political one. And when you see things like climate czar John Kerry flying around on his private jet or driving around in SUVs, from point A to point B in D.C., it really comes off as unserious if even the experts aren't willing to do the marginal amount to try to address this issue. And it hurts the case and it leads to the cynicism that I think we're constantly combating.
Yeah.
Kerry showed up to Obama's party in a private jet, didn't he?
Right.
You can't make it up.
Yeah. Our climate czar shows up in a private jet. Yeah.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.